with all Ontarians over age 18 now eligible for their second COVID-19 vaccine dose, and with new federal guidelines for what you can and can't do safely, summer is here. That means your staycation can be a little more adventurous than it's been for quite some time. So let's get some advice on the best spots Ontario has to offer. In the nation's capital, we're joined by Rewat Dinandan, epidemiologist and associate professor at the University of Ottawa's Faculty of Health Sciences, and Erin Kelly, CEO of Advanced Symbolics, Inc., and in Markham, Ontario, Heather Greenwood Davis, contributing writer for National Geographic and founder of globetrottingmama.com. That is the best name for a website. Anyway, great to have you three with us again. It's so nice to see you all. I want to start just by setting the table for our discussion by putting some of these facts up, and that will really put into perspective what it's been like for the last couple of years in the tourism sector. So Sheldon, if you would, let's bring that up. In 2018, this is of course pre-pandemic, Ontario's tourism sector generated $36 billion in 1 year, and it supported nearly 400,000 jobs in the province. But travelers from the U.S. and overseas declined by 84% last year in 2020 over the year before. And tourism-related employment declined by 13% in 2020 over the year before. Those are very stark numbers. Having said all that, Rewat, come in here and start us off. How safe, in your judgment, is it to travel around the province of Ontario today?
It's pretty safe if you're going to stay in your car and just visit some places for the day. It gets a little trickier if you're staying overnight in certain places. And it depends if you've got your 2 doses. It depends what the nature of the place you're visiting is. So I like to monitor some indicators, among them the epidemiology, the trend of the disease, the percentage of the population that's been vaccinated, and as well the healthcare capacity. So it depends on where you're going. In general, though, I recommend that people get in their cars and visit small towns, spend your money. Don't necessarily stay overnight, but you can definitely spend your money and do some good that way. And
when you say it can be, if you haven't had 2 doses, a little bit tricky, what does tricky mean?
Tricky means that you're still at risk, especially for this Delta variant, right? So you gotta take some extra precautions, wear a good quality mask, keep your distance, don't expose yourself to people unnecessarily. If you got 2 doses, you can take a few more risks, obviously. But in general, we're on the trend towards good things. So every day gets better than the previous one.
Okay. Heather, how much traveling have you been able to do or wanted to do during the course of the last 15 months of this pandemic?
Yeah, wanted to do and been able to do are 2 very, very different things in my life. We were able to get out a little bit last summer when things opened up a little bit, which was great. I did find that we had to be really careful and that I was very nervous the first time I went out. I pretty much packed up all our bed linens to go to a 4-star hotel, so that gives you an idea. But as the year went on, at least as the summer went on, I was able to relax a little bit and get out a little more.
Did I hear that right? You brought your own bed linens to a 4-star hotel?
We did. We were so nervous in that first trip that we actually packed up everything. They actually didn't end up making it out of the car in the destination. Once we went up and saw the room and the precautions that were being taken by the hotel, we felt a lot more comfortable.
I should ask Rewat, is there any need or obligation to do that now?
Not in terms of COVID, but if you're afraid of bed bugs, that works fine. But the fomite transmission thing has been pretty much debunked.
Okay, good to know. Erin, let me get you in here. You've, of course, been on our program many, many times in the past, and you often tell us what Ontarians are thinking through the very famous Polly, which is your algorithm that does polling as well as looking into social media and so on. But I guess we want to hear what you think. What's the most scenic place in your judgment to visit in the province of Ontario today?
Well, I'm a real ecology buff, so I like seeing the change of woodland and vegetation as I travel. So I would say so it's a bit of a tie for me. I really like, of course, Algonquin Park, very scenic. I love being out there. I really like going up to places like Timmins, where it's more isolated. You don't have as many people, and of course, the ecology is very different. But my number 1 choice was Tobermory and Manitoulin Island. Just need I say more? Anybody who's been there will know there's just so much to do for people, for families, and it's just beautiful to look at.
You're not just saying that because I'm the host of this show, are you?
Why are you a big...
I got a cottage on Manitoulin Island. I go there every summer.
Oh.
Yeah.
Where's my invite?
Well,
why am I renting when I go to Manitoulin Island?
It's an 8-hour drive from Toronto, So it's a long way to go, but it's, it's very remote and it's absolutely stunning, isn't it?
Oh, I had no idea you had a cottage there. I love it. It's phenomenal.
And of course, I should have said camp. I have a camp on Manitoulin Island, not a cottage, because of course we Northern Ontarians call it a camp. It's only us snooty Southerners who call it a cottage. So I should correct the record while I still have a chance to do that. Okay, Ray, what's on your list?
For most scenic, my first choice was actually Niagara Falls, of all things, because of the kitsch. Because it's like a little bit of Atlantic City or Vegas right here in Ontario. And I like those kinds of strange experiences. But my real choice is Kingston, of all places, because it's very, very scenic. The streets are wide, they're tree-lined, they're just beautiful. And every step you take is a step through history, it feels like that. Because as most people realize, Kingston was our first capital. And both of my sisters went to grad school at Queen's, so I spent a lot of time there. I have excellent memories of Kingston. It's just a stunning place, if you look at it just the right way.
It's funny how you felt a need to be a bit defensive about saying Niagara Falls, as if we sort of, we all take it for granted, but it is, you're absolutely right. It's incredibly spectacular. And if it's been a number of years since you've seen it, people should go back and look at it. It never gets old.
Right. And you can see another country from there.
Yeah.
Which is interesting.
Very true. Okay, Heather, what's at the top of your list?
Wow, I loved both those picks. I picked Thousand Islands. So it's one of those places where I remember going with my own parents as a kid, but hadn't been back in many, many years, and got out again last summer and saw all the beautiful homes on the water. And, we went kayaking, we were on the ferry. It was just phenomenal, just a gorgeous part of the province.
Fantastic. Ray Watt, how much of the province have you seen?
Well, back in the early 90s, some friends and I rented a Lincoln town car and opened up a map to see where we can go for the day. And we decided to go around the world in Ontario because we went to London, to Paris, to Delhi, pronounced Delhi, and to a little town called Damascus. And we did all this in a few hours. So we've seen a fair bit of the cities no one talks about or thinks about. And it's fascinating. So I think I've seen a fair bit of the province. I encourage people to drive around the world in Ontario.
Now that's hilarious. Okay, London, Paris, I know where they are. Where's Damascus, Ontario?
I'm not sure, but we went there.
But you've been there. That's the main thing. Heather, your pick for the nicest town in Ontario?
Oh, nicest town's got to be Stratford, Ontario, where you've got all these artists, beautiful location, gourmet food, incredible people. And I just find that whenever you get into a place that has a lot of artists, you get a lot of friendly people. That's actually my mom and sons in Stratford, walking around the grounds there and hanging out by the water. So yeah, I've been there many, many times with all parts of my family and absolutely love it.
Now, how do you pick Stratford over Niagara-on-the-Lake, or for that matter, Niagara-on-the-Lake over Stratford? They've got so much in common, starting obviously with culture.
Yes, absolutely. But do they have Bieber? I mean, Stratford's got Bieber. You can do a self-guided Bieber tour in Stratford. I love Niagara too.
That may be the first time Justin Bieber's name has been mentioned on this program. It's entirely possible. So, okay, you're right. The Biebs makes a big difference. Ray Watt, how about prettiest town for you? You mentioned you'd been to around the world in the province of Ontario. What was the prettiest town you saw in your travels?
Well, prettiest, I still say, is Kingston, but I want to talk about nicest if I can. I mean, nicest, where I live right now in Ottawa, it's pretty nice. And I liken it to being a small town that behaves like a big city. And someone described it once as the only capital city where businessmen wear business suits and hiking boots at the same time. But nearby is a place called Perth. And that is extraordinarily nice and pretty. So, I mean, anytime I go to Perth, I think, what would it have been like to have grown up here? It's like a little snippet of Little House on the Prairie. It's near a big city, but it feels like a small town, a small agricultural town. It has that old-fashioned 1800s agricultural town feeling that I adore.
You know, if memory serves, I think about 25 years ago, we did a contest on the previous show I used to do called Studio 2 for the prettiest town in Ontario. And of course, we had hundreds of towns competing for this, and Perth won. So you're onto something there. Now, for anybody who wants to visit, this is Perth, like Highway 7 and 37, around that area of the province in eastern Ontario?
That's right. It's pretty near Ottawa.
Right.
Which is why I go.
Got it. Okay, good. Aaron, how about you? The nicest town in Ontario that you've been to?
Now, this is the hard part about going third, because my choices have been taken. But I was going to say between Kingston, and I always have a tie between Niagara-on-the-Lake and Stratford, because, and I don't know if we're going to be, it doesn't sound like it, we'll be able to go to indoor theater this year, but I love going to the Shaw Festival and the Stratford Festival. So I think my choice has been taken, but I would love to be able to go and take in the theater if we could this year.
Now, it's interesting, you said Timmins earlier. What was it in particular that you liked about Timmins? Because nothing against Timmins. My boss actually is from Timmins, and we've taken this show on the road to Timmins many times, but it's not necessarily at the top of people's lists of places to go if you're on vacation. So what do you like about it?
No, we loved it. I mean, my kids love it. Having, like, we had a little cottage on its own little island with a walkover bridge, and my kids just love seeing different species of, they're bird watchers. They're real geeks, I guess. Bird watchers. They love to bring the binoculars, and they see, and they're really into ecology. Both of them, they study it like religiously, and so they love to see the different species that you don't see here. It's the number one thing they talk about, is how we see different things there. So I didn't mention it so much as a town, but as a place to go and look at nature. It's really different from what you get in Southern Ontario or Eastern Ontario.
That's for sure. Okay, good, thanks. Okay, let's do this. Heather, going to follow up with you. How difficult is it to plan family trips where the kids can get some educational benefit out of it, but it doesn't feel pedagogical, if you know what I mean?
Yeah, I actually think it's quite easy. We just have to do a little bit of extra legwork at the beginning, right? Researching your site and making sure that where you're going, you're actually asking the questions that will help set the stage for it to be a little different than usual. So look for those tours that are a little offbeat, right? Maybe not the typical historical tour, and see if you can get behind the scenes a little bit to get some alternate perspectives. But there's a ton of stuff out there for sure.
Okay, your favorite, I guess, place in the province of Ontario, well known for its history, that you like to go to? What is it?
Well, well known, I would go with Kingston, as Raywat did, but I think the one that we need to know better is Chatham, Kent. So Chatham, Kent is actually best known as being the terminus of the Underground Railroad here in Canada, or one of them. And so there is a ton of history right there that talks about that, and talks about Canada's role in maybe not being as good as it should have been at that time, and sort of not being the hero that it's sometimes painted as. The Buxton School, which is on the Buxton historical site you're looking at there, is actually a school that was all Black and formed because the local white parents didn't want their kids going to school with Black children. In the end, the school became, sorry, I've lost the word, but that brought everyone together because the white parents actually wanted their kids to go to the better school.
Isn't that interesting? And how far back does that school go?
I believe it's back to the 1800s.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Terrific. Terrific. Okay. Chatham, Kent. That's a great choice. Raywat, your pick for a place that's just oozing history in the province.
I have a strange choice. That's Ajax, Ontario. And the reason for that, it's not named after the character in Homer. It's named after the HMX Ajax, which is one of 3 ships involved in a battle in World War II against a Nazi ship called the Graf Spee, I think. And this was something called the Battle of the River Plate, the first naval battle of World War II. It was a big deal back then. It made all the news because it was the first naval battle. And the town is named after one of the ships of the battle. And the street names of that town are all people who were involved in that battle, including the captain of the German Nazi ship, Hans Langdorf. And I think for the longest time, it's the only city in the Western world with a street named after a Nazi, because supposedly he behaved himself quite honorably in accordance with the Hague Convention. I think, though, that there's a movement to rename that street, unless it's already been happening. But it's a touch of World War II history that we're not often aware of right here in the heart of Ontario.
That is fascinating. I didn't know that. And of course, Kitchener used to be Berlin, and the Berlin name did not survive, but apparently this street name did. That's kind of cool. Okay. Aaron, pick up the cudgel, if you would, and tell us your favorite historic place to go.
I have to go with my hometown, Ottawa. I think for Canadian history especially, we've got everything here. The last person to die of capital punishment in Canada is here, so you can take the Haunted Walk. Of course, this was the person who many say was wrongly convicted of assassinating Darcy McGee, a father of Confederation, and so his ghost haunts the Byward Market today. And if you do come down here, of course, you see the Parliament buildings and all of that, and Indigenous sites, but you definitely have to go to the Mackenzie King estate. Ray Watt mentioned the war, and we hear about how our Prime Minister at that time, Mackenzie King, they take you on a haunted walk there too, and it's just fabulous to learn about Canadian history, about a prime minister who during the war was using psychics and mediums to give him advice on what decisions to make. And they're very open about it. And also his relationship with his pets. He believed his dog, there were physically two dogs, but with one name, Pat, because the dog was reincarnated. And my favorite part was when, well, they have the ruins. Of course, they took Canadian ruins and put them on his estate. But my favorite part was when they told us that Mackenzie King, when he died, wanted to be buried with Pat, between Pat's two bodies, his dogs. And this actually went to Westminster because people here felt, well, he should be buried where he wants to be buried. But they also said it would be humiliating to Canada to have a prime minister buried with dogs. And so it actually went to Westminster, and it was ruled that he could not be buried with Pat.
Well, that explains why, because he's buried 20 minutes from this studio at Mount Pleasant Cemetery. And I go visit him all the time, actually, and it explains why his gravesite says, "Here lies William Lyon Mackenzie King," and there's no reference to Pat. I guess Pat didn't make the cut.
No, Pat's at the Mackenzie King estate, and they actually have a cafe there called Cafe Pat, where you can go and pay your respects.
To Pat. That's
Pat.
great.
And
Okay.
There's one tombstone and two dogs, of course, and it's just Pat singular.
The stuff we're learning tonight. This is terrific. Well, let me add one thing to the list as well, and Aaron, it, I guess, refers back to your comments about Manitoulin Island. Indigenous people have lived on Manitoulin Island for 10,000 years, and there are some fabulous museums, art galleries, tremendous culture to see. If you're interested in Indigenous history on Manitoulin Island, another great reason to hop the ferry from Tobermory, go across to South Bay Mouth and see stuff. Anyway, I put that out there, and let's follow up on that. You know, and let's get a little controversial here, but because of recent developments, I suspect there has been a greater willingness among non-Indigenous Canadians to learning more about Indigenous history and culture. So I just mentioned Manitoulin Island. Heather, do you want to pick up on that and suggest a place where if people are interested in Indigenous history, they might also consider going?
Yeah, I second you on Manitoulin Island. I was up there and spent some time with the Wiki-Wimikong tourism people, and they actually took me over to Point Grandine, so back on the mainland, and that is the first built from scratch First Nations owned and operated park. It's phenomenal. It's absolutely gorgeous. So definitely do that. And out in Chatham, again, there's a new offering called Awaken Your Spirit, which was all about the Ojibwe spirit horses. So you have experiences where you're connecting with the horses, learning First Nations and Métis history and culture, and just learning how to do better and be better.
Great. Ray Watt, how about you on Indigenous history?
Yeah, a few years ago, I got to visit one of my former students who runs an Indigenous health program in Northern Ontario, and she lives in Sioux Lookout. So Sioux Lookout is my choice. And it's a town about 5,000 people, maybe 300 kilometers away from Thunder Bay, and half the population are of Indigenous extraction. The interesting thing is the name, Sioux Lookout. It's named that because the Sioux Mountain in the center of the town is where the Ojibwe people would look out for invading Sioux warriors. It's the place where they looked out for the Sioux, hence the Sioux Lookout. So I highly recommend it. Strong Indigenous features. The culture is strong there. And of course, it's a great place to go in Northern Ontario in general, as we should all visit.
Right on. Aaron, how about you?
I love actually taking in the arts when it comes to Indigenous culture. And so here, I've had a lot of opportunity at the Shankman Art Center, at universities. They have great readings and performance art. So that's kind of the culture part. And I'd love to see that married with some of the physical places, and especially Heather mentioned the provincial park. I would like to see more of our provincial parks celebrating and exploring Indigenous culture. For example, I think about, as a child, and I took my kids there to Marie Among the Hurons, where they've recreated this 17th century place where the missionaries were, and it's still very much told from the perspective of European history and the missionaries. And yes, you can make birch bark canoes and drums, but it's still it's really kind of light. And I'd love to see more about the Wendat people and what was their experience there, told more from their perspective, because they've gone through a lot of effort to recreate this place, and it would be great to see more Indigenous there. But other than that, I think checking out the theaters and checking out opportunities to really see storytelling and dance, that's what I've really enjoyed the most.
Apropos of this, and if I may use my moderator's prerogative here one more time, I'd add one more thing to the list, and that is there's a residential school building in Brantford, Ontario, 2 hours west, not even 2 hours west of where I'm sitting right now. It was a residential school until the 1990s, and Indigenous organizations have taken it over, and they now run it as a museum. And the building is there in its original form. You can go inside. It's very well done. And if people want to take a day trip to Brantford to see, it's really quite a magnificent building, which they have restored and run now as a museum. And you can learn something a little bit more about what the reckoning, in fact, that we're going through right now as a country. So I'd add that to the list. Yeah, Brantford, Ontario, something to see. Okay, let's do, where do we want to go next? Okay, research on infection rates before we go anywhere. So I got to start with the epidemiologist on this. If you're planning a trip, I mean, how much research do you have to do on the epidemiological front before you go anywhere?
I think is advisable. I think check with the local public health of the place you want to visit to, their website, to see what the situation is. Is it technically a hot zone? If that's the case, probably avoid it, especially if the healthcare capacity where you're going is limited. You don't want to add to their burden if you are a susceptible person, especially if you've only had one dose, for example. But otherwise, let public health do public health, and don't spend too much time worrying about this stuff. Just follow the guidance and live your life otherwise.
Heather, your view on that?
Yeah, I think it is important that you're doing a little bit of research. You want to make sure that if you are going to these places, you feel comfortable going and you're not, carrying some problems with you when you go. You want to make sure that it's safe for you to be there and it's safe for the people you're visiting.
Great point. All right, let's finish up on this. I guess I want to know whether you three are planning any trips this summer for you and yours. Erin, start us off. You going anywhere?
Yeah, we're going to Algonquin Park.
How long does it take to get there from where you are?
2.5, 3 hours.
Not bad at all. And how long are you going to stay?
About a week.
And what do you hope to get done?
Paddling with the moose. I hope to get nothing done. That's the whole idea. But be outside and just fresh air and enjoying some, family time. Not like we haven't had a lot of that in the last 18 months.
But you have it in Algonquin Park, that's for sure.
Yeah. Exactly.
So this will be different.
We decided to stay away from. Yeah, we're still staying out in the open air for this summer, and I think partly it's because a lot of things are booked. We actually looked around; a lot of things were booked by the time we got around. So. And
will you stay in like a real lodge or pup tents, or how do you do it?
No, we're people of the earth.
Good for you. Very impressive. Okay, Ray, what? How about you?
I have a boring answer. I've got a 1-year-old freshly new baby who hasn't seen many of his relatives. So we're going to Toronto a lot, where he'll do the tour of all his relatives. Safe, mostly outdoor tours due to COVID. But that's what we're doing. Going to Toronto and just shopping the baby around.
That sounds great. Okay, finish us off, Ms. Davis.
Well, I think we're swapping because I think I'm going to find myself in Ottawa this summer. I was mentioning earlier, I have a son who's about to start university, his second year there. So I want to make sure he gets out and sees it. And I'm also thinking I should head up to the Peking camp on Manitoulin Island, since that sounds like the place to be.
You drop by anytime you like. Now, mind you, you may have a tough time finding it because it's near a village of 100 people and it's in the suburbs of that village. So it's not easy to find. So good luck.
I'm sure you'll provide me with directions. I'm confident.
Very good. Heather, if you're serious about that, I am happy to give you coordinates of where we are. That would be fantastic.
Perfect.
Okay,
Perfect.
Great. Well, look, I want to thank all three of you for coming on the program this time and on previous occasions as well. We wish you all the good fortune in the world to enjoy your summer break, and let's just hope for a better fall, right, as we go forward. Thanks so much to all three of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The Agenda with Steve Paikin is made possible through generous philanthropic contributions from viewers like you. Thank you for supporting TVO's journalism.